Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Jennifer Carlson, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you, John. Good to see you.
It is a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Seattle. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the role of apprenticeships in preparing the future workforce. Skills are all the rage right now. That's what everyone is talking about in organizations. They're trying to figure out how do we better map skills and how do we better hire for skills rather than just like someone lists a diploma or years of experience. But what do you actually do to demonstrate skills? And in that environment, looking at apprenticeships is really valuable. Any sort of experiential learning opportunity for students to really demonstrate what they can actually do, not just what they know, is going to be really, really important for organizations today, but organizations in the future as well. So as we get started, I wanted to share Jennifer's bio with everybody. Jennifer Carlson serves as the CEO of Apprenti. Apprenti is a nonprofit apprenticeship intermediary and workforce consulting organization that delivers a secondary pipeline of tech talent to address U.S. domestic digital skills shortages. A former business leader with AIG, Progressive, and adjunct professor at Seattle University, Jennifer also serves on the Tech Councils of North America Foundation Board and as an advisory board member for Apprenticeships for America. There's a whole lot more I could say about your background, but I'm going to pause there. Anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on it?
No, I think let's just dive in.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's start with just a quick overview of Apprenti. Like, what inspired you to create Apprenti? What were the gaps that you were seeing in the workforce, between what traditional higher ed is doing or tech colleges and such versus, what you're trying to do in preparing future hiring pipelines?
Yeah, not to get too bogged down in the history of it, but having been on the executive leadership side of some IT transformations, it was quick to see there are not enough tech practitioners out there. And we had to do a lot with consultants because we couldn't find enough people to hire to do those in the large Fortune 500 companies. Concurrently, I would say in my own experience, as regularly one of the only women, if not the only woman in the room, there was a severe lack of diversity approaching the problems that we were trying to solve. So when I moved to Seattle and made Seattle home, this is not the insurance mecca I had come from. It is a tech mecca. And so working with the trade association, it was easy to see that this wasn't just a consumer problem from a B2B perspective. This was the fact that the tech companies themselves really couldn't find enough talent and were struggling with some of the same issues. And that made very clear that we need to create another pipeline. There needed to be more talent creation going on, but the ecosystem from a higher ed perspective is very limited.
Yeah, and I would suspect, especially within the tech sector, anything STEM related in the tech industry in particular, though, not only finding talent generally, but more diverse talent, right? It is particularly challenging. And so if you're trying to extend the funnel of potential inputs of more women, more people of various diverse backgrounds into the tech industry, having more than just kind of the traditional university pipeline is going to be really important.
Well, we've started hearing more and more companies come to the table and talk about the fact that, there's an incredible value proposition to higher ed, always has been. There's never a question about that. But that we're not getting enough talent. And then when we think of diversity from a talent perspective, it's that alternative set of ideas coming in the front door, whether it's because it's a different set of schools than we typically recruit from, or it's people from other backgrounds coming in. They look at problems differently. And there's a huge value proposition, tons of research out there about the ability for people to come in that haven't been classically trained to look at the problem differently.
Yeah. So that cognitive diversity, the mindset diversity, just the background diversity, all of it, super, super, super valuable. All right. So you found Apprenti, and or I guess describe a little bit how that's kind of filling this gap and helping to create these alternative pipelines.
Well, we had the benefit being in Washington of a lot of tech companies founded here. So we've got everybody
Yeah.
from Microsoft and Amazon to Zillow, F5, Redfin, Tableau, all these companies here that were struggling with the same problem, but individually were trying to figure it out for themselves. And
Hmm.
serendipitously in 2015, this is the same time that the US government pumped out a grant to try and expand registered apprenticeship, which is the what
Hmm.
we've always used in this country for the building trades, thinking blue collar.
Yeah.
It's really just an ecosystem. It's a hybrid of some classroom training with a hands-on set of training, and it's an alternative to going to college that comes out with very similar levels of training, but without the formality of the degree and an accelerated path. So it was convenient, if you will, to have a conversation with those companies together from the standpoint of a trade association at the time to say, how are we going to figure out a bigger way to fix this problem? Because it's not a Washington problem, it's not a single
Right.
company problem, it's an everyone, everywhere problem. And every company is a tech company now. I mean, Starbucks has a massive tech department, right? JP
Right.
Morgan Chase, massive tech departments, and they're competing for the same talent, and there isn't enough of it out there. So, how are we going to solve this? And thankfully, they were all willing to come to the table and say, you're right. And we like having a third party convener, which is sort of how we became the intermediary to connect not only what the companies were doing and kind of reevaluate which jobs have to have the degree and which jobs could be done without one, and
Hmm.
at the same time pull in all the other resources, which is why I founded it as a nonprofit so that we could work more closely with higher ed, we could find funding through state and federal resources and
Hmm.
access that, and then manage it on behalf of the employers who wanted the benefit without all of the oversight.
Yeah, yeah. This is perhaps a bit of a tangent, but I think it will resonate with a lot of folks is, like thinking about the overall, life cycle of the labor force and this talent pipeline and apprenticeships or other sorts of experiential learning to give people kind of boots on the ground experience, hands-on, like they can actually learn how to do stuff in the trades that's been super common for a long time.
So huge.
And we can do more of those types of things in other types of talent pipelines. What's been your experience in terms of like the career path for folks who maybe go through an apprenticeship kind of an approach, that accelerated approach, but not with the traditional college degree? Like maybe that could potentially be great for entry level types of jobs. What does it mean for them as they want to progress in their career?
So the good news is this, and we set out when we did this kind of analysis with the companies to talk about the which jobs have to have the degree and which jobs don't.
Yeah,
These big tech companies sat back and they really did a pragmatic review and said, okay, about 40% of the jobs in-house have to have the degree or higher. Think data scientists, right?
yeah,
PhD in math. But so they kind of gave me the finger wagging and were like, told you. And I was like, uh-huh, and let's talk about the other 60%. That's a lot of hiring that has to take place. And and they were like, yeah, well, let's look at those. And our biggest challenge, according to the industry, was the fact that those are the jobs that require somebody to come in the door with 3 to 5 years of experience in the
yeah,
degree.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, so what is it you're getting out of the degree that's telling you they have to have a degree for those jobs when you've just indicated that those are not jobs that necessarily would have to? And the answer was, well, we know they know how to learn. And I'm like, then why do you care where they learned it?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So let's start talk about that skills-based background. Let's talk about what is it that they need to come to the table with to be able to step into that role if I could get them the level of training that your expectation is requiring. And so we took the 10% at the bottom off the table, those kind of IT help desk jobs, the super fundamentals. There are a ton of programs out there that do a great job at
Yeah.
filling those. I don't need to compete with that space, nor do I want to cannibalize it. So let's focus on that 50% that's in the middle. And that's where the companies have had the biggest pain point because they can't get anybody with those years of experience plus the degree. And I'm like, all right, well, if we agree we're going to waive the degree, now what is it that they need to have in terms of skills? That gets a little more company centric, but I've got candidates coming in the door that say things like, I've done taking out the where they did it. I've done supply chain, I've done payroll, I've hired people, I've, done all of these other things. The company doesn't need to know that it came in the form of being a Burger King manager, right? They
Mhm.
still know how to do supply chain management and consumption. They know how to do people scheduling and management. They've done payroll. They've done all these other things that as a skill, the companies have accepted and said, wow, those are great skills for us. There's a prejudice and a bias built into the idea of where did they do it, not correlating to what we do. But if I can get them then the skilled training that they need, which usually is a certification that we as the tech sector have already created because it's AWS Cloud, it's Azure Cloud, it's those are certs you can get, or CompTIA Network Plus or Security Plus. These are things that are globally consumed. And in many cases, we remind these companies that they already consume apprenticeship in other parts of the globe because it's pretty standardized in all sectors in Europe and in Asia, that they kind of step back and go, okay, let's give this a try. And then they're looking at how do they scale that equitably in their organization so that these folks are really walking in the door and have the runway for not only being successfully retained in that job, which 90% of our placements are into the
Mhm.
role
Mhm.
that they were in the company, but the company is now working through that skill set issue. Now we're only 5, 6 years in
Mhm.
to the density that we need to be able to do the longitudinal study to show that they have long-term progression. But we're seeing long-term progression and are partnering with the U.S. Department of Commerce to do a longitudinal and look back at are they staying in their job? Are they growing in their job? Or suspiciously, are only the people with a degree from some institution along the way
Yeah.
going to get promoted and the other ones don't. So there's a lot of other secondary work going on in the marketplace around can we map it to college credit so they at least have credit if they want to go back and fill and finish the degree? Is
Mhm.
it something the company is truly going to require? These are people by and large in their early 30s. The median age in our program is 31. So these are people with 10 years of life experience, and they've been really sticky to the sector. But we need to now understand what their longevity is and if they're going to get the paper ceiling hold up at some point.
Yeah, yeah. And I have to say, I'm happy and impressed that so many organizations are willing to take a good hard look at like the assumptions around what's actually required to be able to do the job. Because
Yeah,
I mean, for forever, there's been need a college degree, need 3 to 5 years of experience, and maybe you do. But in a lot of cases, do you really? But both from the degree standpoint, but also like I
right.
hate it when I see that on a job posting, 3 to 5 years of experience, and especially if it's for a fairly entry level type of position. You're just like, why? And it also, you just mentioned like so many of the people that go through your program, they have years of experience, years of life experience, years of work experience. Maybe it's just in adjacent areas, right? Maybe or maybe it's a woman who chose to be like an at-home mom or a caregiver to an elderly parent, or like there's a gazillion scenarios, right, where someone may not have like the traditional on paper on their resume like clear linear progression, towards a certain career. In fact, that's becoming less and less common. And so like finding ways to tap into the various really valuable skills that people may have, but it doesn't come in the traditional way. And we've always assumed it had to come in that traditional way. So I'm really pleased that more organizations are approaching it like this. But it's also it's a hard mindset to shift,
It is.
right?
It's a culture shift. It's a
It's a
huge
total
culture
culture
shift.
shift.
It's
Yeah.
not just a culture shift for tech, it's a culture shift for the US.
Yeah.
Because we're not the only ones building into this sector. I mean, healthcare is doing it. We're expanding into life sciences and biotech. You have financial services doing it in roles beyond technology. Like everybody is moving in this direction because there isn't enough coming out of higher ed to fill our collective need. So it's not a negative on higher ed. It's just a capacity issue on higher ed. And
Mhm.
and as much as we talk about this idea for the last 50 years of college for all, like let's make everybody go to college, it doesn't change the fact that whether you like it or not, 70% of the US does not go to college.
Right. Yeah.
70%. And interestingly enough, that's consistent with Europe and Asia.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like it's not some arbitrary thing. This is a pretty well settled statistic across the globe that is not everybody's learning modality. That is not an indicator of somebody's ability to be successful. I can tell you because We do not qualify anybody on a degree or prior work experience. They come in cold, and we try to keep it that way to make sure that we're talking to people who have the capacity to learn and the interest. And then we screen them on what their skill sets are and distill that to send to an employer. But until they've actually been accepted to the program and are filling out their new hire paperwork, that's the only time we find out what your prior work experience was and what your educational level was. And I will tell you, interestingly enough, as diverse as the population are that come to us, 50% or very close to 50% of them have a degree. It's just that they did their degrees in, liberal arts, or they went to night and weekend school, online university, for-profit school, schools that we as an industry have not been historically known for recruiting from or even
Right.
discounting. But yet these folks did what they were told to do and got the degree for all. And I will tell you, at the other end of the pipeline, that 90% retention looks identical whether they had the degree or not. So the degree was not an indicator of greater success.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's so much data to support what you're saying.
Yep.
And again, it's a mindset shift, it's a culture shift for a lot of organizations. And as I said in the introduction, like it is like skills. Skills are the hot topic. Like everyone's talking about skills, but only some organizations seem to really be leaning into what that actually can mean in a way that looks different than what they've always done,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And it's because they have a whole like system set up for
That's
what
right.
they've always done, and now
The
they,
infrastructure is there for that.
uh-huh, uh-huh. So that's where having like a partner like what you're doing, how that can really help support it, so they don't have to recreate the wheel, right?
Well, and if, this is the question a lot of people ask us is what's the difference between an internship and an apprenticeship?
Hmm.
And, an internship is usually they're tied to college, number one. Number two, that every company does it differently for every occupation. We don't call the job the same thing inside every company. They could be there for 6 months and do six different things for a month each at a company, or they could do one thing really well for 6 months, or 3 months. And that's, I think, going back to your point earlier about we keep putting this minimum 3 to 5 years of experience and what
Hmm.
do we really want out of that? It's that most employers behind closed doors will admit that they don't want to be the first employer. And because
Right.
they know it's a higher turnover,
Right.
and they have to do the heavy lift of onboarding these folks. Well, guess what? That's the same thing as an apprenticeship. The difference is the industry and the 500 companies we work with are the ones weighing in on what the job standard is and agreeing to what that job title taxonomy is. Even if we don't call it that, we know what that job is. And
Hmm.
they're saying these are the things they're going to be proficient in at the end of a year. And we know how to consume that. And that takes the place of that 3 to 5 year expectation. And a company kind of equate this really nicely for us. That they had a lot of internal executives going, where are these folks coming in on a college spectrum? And finally, after a year or two of doing it, they were like, we got to stop trying to equate them to that. They're their own thing. Stop trying to fit the round peg into the square hole. And instead just assume we have two different taxonomies and two different titling systems. And when they did that, they said the folks that we're recruiting and pulling directly in from college are coming in with a philosophical and a theoretical background of understanding how we got to where we are and know the fundamentals, but don't have the experience. Whereas the folks coming in from an apprenticeship have just spent immersively months in the classroom writing code, doing what they need to do, understanding cybersecurity, whatever the role is, and they're ready to hit the ground running, but they don't have the philosophical background to understand how we got here. And they're like, this is just two sides of the same coin. We need to both build some muscle about how do we onboard this group similarly to this group and get a similar outcome, just different. And some of these companies are starting to recognize that when they pull it in and they go, look, we're an enterprise level company. We want 500 people every year that we recruit in. Maybe it should be 250 from college
Hmm.
and 250 apprentices because they can actually co-mentor each other and take some of the pain off the mentor or the mentor's
Yeah.
shoulders, who's the manager, right? Like they can help level each other up. And what you're getting with a 31-year-old is a level of maturity and quickness
Yeah.
to learn and a want to be there. And it's working out really well on a retention level.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Jennifer, this has just been a really great eye-opening conversation.
Yeah,
I know at the time I need to let you go here in a minute, but
sure.
before we wrap things up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us a final word for today.
Sure. J. Carlson, Carlson, at apprenticareers.org, apprenticareers.org, nonprofit, or on LinkedIn. And I think you have my LinkedIn, my LinkedIn link that you can give. Either way is perfectly fine. Happy to connect with you. My final thought, and I would also recommend looking at our website for more information, apprenticareers.org. My final thought is this. If you're in a position where you have vacancies in your organization and it takes longer than 3 months to fill that vacancy, and this does not have to be in technology only, this could be
Yeah.
HR, technology, any other role. If it takes 3 months to fill that role, then it should be an apprenticeable role. Hard
Yeah.
stop. You should be talking with myself as an intermediary or any number of other intermediaries in this space that focus on your industry that can help you fill those on a consistent basis on a target date and have pre-qualified people coming in the door ready to fill those gaps.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the
Thanks, Bob.
audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Jennifer and her team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe. They can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.